Around the year 110, a bishop from Syria was led in chains to Rome. What was his crime? Being a Christian leader in the age of Roman emperors. On this very long journey, he wrote many letters, 7 letters that still exist today. His name was Ignatius of Antioch. Soon after that, his body would be torn into pieces, but his words would never be silenced. Why? This is the story of Ignatius of Antioch. Ignatius wasn't a rebel, nor was he a soldier. He was a bishop of Antioch, one of the earliest and largest centers of Christianity. Actually, it is the place where followers of Jesus were called Christians for the very first time. By this time in history, the Roman Empire started seeing Christians as very dangerous. And why? They refused to worship the emperor. They did not go to war because of Jesus' teachings, and also never participated in pagan sacrifices. Of course, this stirred up a lot of hate from the Romans and the people surrounding them. Because of this crime, Ignatius was arrested under the reign of Emperor Trajan. And after his trial, he was sentenced to be executed in Rome in an arena and torn apart by wild beasts. But he wasn't taken right away. He was then taken on a long journey, miles and miles, to Rome. And on this long journey, Ignatius wrote. He wrote 7 letters, and through these letters addressed to different churches and different people, we get to see his heart and what he was thinking about his impending and upcoming execution. And through these letters, they reveal a man who knew he was walking to his death and embraced it. In one of his letters, he pleads saying, "Do not hinder me from living, and do not wish me to die. Let me become food for these wild beasts through whom I can attain to God." You see, for Ignatius, martyrdom wasn't a defeat. It was actually his final imitation of his Lord Jesus Christ. To him, the arena was nothing else but an altar for his body that he would present himself and also count it worthy to suffer the same way as his Lord had suffered for him. Why would such a respected bishop desire such a fate? For Ignatius, following Jesus meant following him all the way, even through suffering and death, like what had happened to his Lord. For him, martyrdom was an ultimate witness that one could make, proof that the gospel was worth everything, even life itself. In his mind, he had the echoes of the Pauline words that for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. In these letters, we don't just see dying alone, but we see him stressing the desire for unity in the church, calling people to love one another and show the kind of love that they have received from their Lord, and ultimately to show their love in how they obey his teachings, not just paying lip service, but following him even in the way they were acting. And that meant separating themselves from the world and not joining and mingling what the rest of the Romans were doing. So we see that even in his final moments towards his execution, Ignatius was shepherding the flock. So when Ignatius finally reached Rome, he was led into the arena. There, as the crowds roared, he was fed to the wild beasts, to the wild animals, to entertain the crowds that had gathered. Not much is known about his final words, but tradition tells that he was torn apart into pieces and almost nothing of him was left, besides some bones of his, which the Christians went and collected so that they could remember him from. So for the early Christians, Ignatius had joined the ranks of the apostles and the prophets who had died for what they had believed to be true. One other voice crying out and saying that Jesus is Lord, but not Caesar. But his story leaves us with many challenges and many questions to answer. What is worth dying for? But most importantly, for us, what is worth living for in this day and age? And I hope that we as Ignatius can have a unanimous answer to that. saying that Jesus earned his kingdom. It is worth living for with every ounce of our strength today. If you like such stories and such content, I would love to invite you to like and subscribe, share this story with someone who you think might enjoy watching it. Until the next video, grace and peace to you all.